Hi, everyone. Welcome to Sunday's Other Scriptures for September 10th. I'm going to be preaching on Matthew 18, starting at verse 12, which starts out with Jesus telling a parable about a lost sheep and the shepherd leaving the 99 to go rescue the one sheep. So the context is Jesus' care for each individual. And then Jesus goes on to give what I argue sometimes is the most ignored part of Jesus' teachings, which is how we should deal when we're in conflict with each other, when someone else sins against us, in which Jesus says to confront them privately, personally first, and then if you have to, bring a couple of witnesses, and then and only then go and tell the elders of the church, and then treat them as you would a tax collector or a pagan, which is that is try to win them over. It really emphasizes winning people over within the body of Christ. And then Jesus concludes with a passage that's often quoted out of context, which is if any of you agree on anything on earth, it'll be done in heaven, for wherever two or three are gathered, there I am with them. And so the idea is that we are all in this together. And that's the way God sees us. That's the way we ought to treat each other. We ought to always try to win the person rather than the argument. Now, having said that, we have a lot to explore there. There's even more to explore based on our other readings. The first reading is a short passage from Ezekiel that I have to be honest and say I struggled with for a while. God tells Ezekiel that he's a watchman for the house of Israel. You might think a night watchman, somebody who's a night guard. That is his job, is to warn people when they are straying from God. And God goes so far as to say that if Ezekiel stays quiet and doesn't warn people about their sin, then their blood, their punishment is on Ezekiel. But if Ezekiel warns them and they don't turn back to God, then their blood is on their own head. In other words, even in a culture that kind of warns us to be tolerant and not to confront other people about sin, we as God's spokespeople still have a responsibility to warn people when their sin is leading them away from God. That doesn't mean we're the nitpickers of the universe, but it does mean when someone's sin is serious and when they aren't aware of the consequences before God, part of the job of Christians is to let each other know about that. The second reading then is from Psalm 32, a psalm of David, in which David talks about how blessed it is to know that your sins are covered by the Lord. And he goes on to talk about what happens if you don't confess your sin, that, day and night your hand was heavy on me, my strength was sapped. In other words, our guilt when we don't confess our sin before God weighs heavily on us, we would say. But when we confess our sins, God is gracious and forgives our sins. And then we can have confidence that in the day of trouble, God will hear us because there's no sin standing in the way. So we have the first reading, which is about confronting people with their sin. The second reading is about being honest about our own sin, which really creates some balance there. Our third reading is part of this continuous reading through Romans, but I think it makes it particularly relevant to our time because it's Romans chapter 13, in which Paul talks about submitting to governing authorities. And it's important to note here, when he says authorities, he's talking about the office or the rule of law. He's not talking about the individual when he says that God has established the authorities. God didn't choose the Roman emperor. And God doesn't choose our presidents, although there are some branches of Christianity that would, kind of believe that he does. No, we choose our presidents, and the Roman emperors and throughout most of history, most of the governing authorities were not chosen by the people or by God. They were just put in place. Now, in the European line, the belief was that the king was put in place by God. But we don't believe that, and it's not biblical apart from Saul and King David and Solomon and the Israelite kings. Um, the issue is, how do we deal with the authorities meaning the office, regardless of who is in that office. And Paul says we submit to them. That is, we humble ourselves and we do what is right based on the rule of law, and we don't rebel against them. Now, obviously, there are exceptions to this rule if they are particularly immoral. Dietrich Bonhoeffer, as a Lutheran pastor in Nazi Germany, struggled with this, as many people have, including our founding fathers. What if the ruling authority is unjust? Well, if you have the ability to overthrow them, then you ought to overthrow them, but not for the sake of your own ego, not because you want to overthrow, for example, an election. You do it for the sake of other people who are suffering. But if you can, you always do that even while showing respect for the office. Therefore, you have, for example, King David had the opportunity to kill King Saul when King Saul was evil and was immorally hunting down David. David had done nothing wrong, but Saul was using his power to hunt down David. David had the opportunity to kill Saul, and he refused to do it out of respect for the office, for the authority that God had established. So you and I do everything we can to submit to the governing authorities. And that includes paying taxes, Jesus says. And you might remember there are situations in Jesus' own life where he, though he was the Son of God, and though he was, for example, Lord of the Sabbath, he paid the temple tax. And though the Son of God, nonetheless, he had respect for Pontius Pilate. He even had respect for the chief priest, who was not lawfully conducting Jesus' trial. It was unlawful for them to meet at night. There were false witnesses that were being brought forward. And so we as Christians strike this balance where we submit to governing authorities regardless of who holds the office. And of course, there are a few exceptions, but the point that Paul gets to is that we do this out of love. So why do we pay taxes? Why do we submit to governing authorities? Because the rule of law and the tax system that goes to work to defend our country, to provide roads, to provide commerce, and so on, this benefits the larger community. And we as Christians are always interested in serving others more so than ourselves. And Paul refers to this as the rule of love, that we have this debt of love that we owe Christ. We can't pay him back, but what we do is we strive to serve one another out of recognition that we owe God for everything. And part of the way that we do that is we pay our taxes and we respect the rule of law. So it's really an application of this confrontation issue that Jesus says, that is, that we recognize good and evil. We have a responsibility to point out good and evil, but not to attack the individual and not to overthrow the order when it's possible. This is really, I think, very compelling, sometimes very complicated, but this is clearly who we are. Martin Luther expressed this, by the way, as the right hand and left hand kingdom. They're both the arms of God. They're both authorities established by God. But the kingdom of the church, the hand that is the church, has the job of proclaiming the forgiveness of sins, as Jesus says, binding and loosing in heaven. The governing authorities, that is the other hand of God, their job is to provide punishment for sins here on earth. And the two should not be commingled as they were before Luther's time. They need to be seen as separate hands of God with separate spheres of function. So anyway, I've gone on long enough about that. I hope that this stimulates some good conversation and discussion. The Lord bless you.